She didn't hug him, didn't sleep with him, but every night lying beside me, she would silently text her ex. Those very messages tore open the veil of our false happiness, revealing that I had slowly vanished from her life. She found that connection with someone else, through silent texts each night. I'm Ryan, 37 years old. My life had always been a calm, steady stream, built upon traditional values and a firm belief in love and marriage. I genuinely believed that true love could weather any storm, and that sharing was the strongest invisible thread between two people. We had a cozy home in suburban Atlanta, stable jobs, and plans for the future. A perfect picture I'd meticulously crafted with all my heart and soul, until that fateful night, when a text message not meant for me tore through the facade of our happiness, revealing a truth more devastating than any betrayal. It wasn't some loud affair, a dramatic secret romance. It was a slow, quiet disappearance, to the point where I didn't even realize I'd lost Emma, the woman I trusted absolutely, in our own home. A silent loss, but one that crushed my spirit more than any other shock. We'd been married for 8 years. For those 8 years, Emma was my whole world. She wasn't a perfect woman by any societal standard. She had her flaws, her hidden corners, her difficult moments, but those very things made her real and endearing to me. I loved the way she laughed radiantly when telling a funny story, the way she knitted her brows in concentration while reading a book, and especially, I loved the way she looked at me. That gaze, whenever our eyes met, made me feel like the whole world suddenly stood still. All sounds vanished, leaving just the two of us in an endless moment. It was a look of absolute trust, of unquestioning love, of belonging. I trusted Emma, trusted her purity and loyalty, so much so that I never once entertained a thought of doubt, not even for a fleeting second, not even in a bad dream. But then, one fateful April evening, a Friday night after a stressful work week, Emma and I had just finished dinner. She was tired, slumped on the sofa, falling asleep right as our favorite TV show started. The warm glow of the living room lamp illuminated Emma's sleeping face. She looked so peaceful and fragile. The phone on the coffee table suddenly vibrated. A notification popped up on the lock screen. Every character crystal clear: T, the person Emma had once mentioned as her first love. A name that was just a distant memory in some trivial story about her youth. I'd never paid attention to that name, because I believed the past was the past, and I was Emma's present, her future. I'm not the type to snoop through my wife's phone. I believe in the principle of privacy and an untainted trust. I'm straightforward by nature, and I always value transparency. Yet that night, something, a quiet, eerie curiosity, or perhaps a chilling intuition, pushed me to reach out. My hand trembled as I touched her phone. A sense of guilt crept in, a boundary violation I never thought I'd commit, but it was quickly overshadowed by an invisible fear, a bad premonition that was slowly consuming me. I unlocked the screen. The password was our wedding anniversary. 0715, a small detail that now made my heart ache, like a mockery of my innocence. I scrolled through the most recent messages. Nothing too obvious, no cliché "I miss you" or "I still love you," no fiery words typically seen in dramatic affair scenarios from movies. Instead, there were lines of text that were even more unsettling, more painful than physical betrayal, because they touched something more fundamental: the soul connection. I saw surprisingly intimate questions, gentle laughing emojis that hinted at deep understanding, and especially lines describing personal life, small daily plans, fleeting emotions that ideally I, her husband, the man who shared her bed every night, should have been the first to hear, the first to be shared with. Emma told T about the pressure at work, about her dream of opening a small flower shop when we retired, about how she'd just learned an exciting new recipe from a Food Network show. Emma hadn't mentioned any of this to me. Or if she had, she'd only brushed over it, without any enthusiasm, without any connection, as if they were insignificant trivialities. But with T, she recounted them in detail, with emotion, as if they were the most precious things in her day. A living diary that I had no right to read. I read, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. Emma still slept soundly, her breathing even, carefree, her lips slightly smiling as if she were having a beautiful dream, perhaps a dream about the messages she had just sent. As for me, I quietly put the phone back in its original place, as if I had never touched it. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My eyes were wide open, but my mind was lost in a tangled mess of unanswered questions, painful conjectures gnawing at my soul until dawn. I didn't know what to do, what to say. I only knew that a door had opened, revealing a stark truth I never wanted. The next morning, I didn't wake Emma. I didn't ask anything either. I knew I couldn't face the truth immediately. Couldn't face Emma when my heart was overwhelmed with questions and pain. When I still didn't know what to say, where to start, I pretended nothing had happened. Still the same Ryan as yesterday. Still greeting Emma with a light kiss on her forehead as she prepared breakfast. But from that moment on, a subtle shift occurred within me. I started observing Emma. Every gesture, every glance, every habit of hers was unconsciously noted by me, like a detective searching for evidence in a case where I knew for sure there would be no culprit, only me as the victim. I noticed Emma's new habits, habits that had existed for who knows how long without me noticing. Or perhaps I had been too careless, too trusting. She often took her phone into the bathroom, keeping the volume as low as possible. And sometimes, I would hear soft giggles echoing from behind the closed door. Giggles I had never heard directed at me. Not even a polite smile. Whenever I walked into the room, she would startle, quickly putting her phone away or switching to another app. That haste, that startled reaction, those evasive glances, spoke volumes more than any words. I saw her smile while looking at her phone. A radiant, genuine smile that I hadn't seen her direct at me in a long time. That smile used to be mine. Ours, the light in my life. Now, it belonged to a lifeless screen. I also realized that whenever Emma received a message from T, she would have a characteristic expression, an unusually sparkling look in her eyes, a slight smile at the corner of her lips, and then complete focus on her phone screen, as if the world around her no longer existed. When I came home from work, I would often ask, "How was your day?" She would answer curtly, "Good" or "normal," and immediately glue her eyes back to her phone. One time, I tried to strike up a conversation. "My boss told another terrible joke today. Do you want to hear it?" Emma just hummed in acknowledgement, her eyes still on the screen, and I knew she wasn't really listening. Our conversations became increasingly superficial, only revolving around daily routines, no longer profound sharings, no heart-to-heart talks, no connection between two souls. 3 weeks passed, each day a test of my patience and trust. The silence between us wasn't the peace of a happy marriage, but the echo of a growing distance, an invisible wall slowly building between us. I felt lost in my own home, like an uninvited guest, an unnecessary presence in my wife's life. Loneliness slowly consumed me, a loneliness even more terrifying than being alone. It was the loneliness of being beside the person you love, but feeling miles apart. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. The feeling of being abandoned, forgotten in my own marriage, gnawed at my soul, keeping me from eating and sleeping, leaving me in a constant state of anxiety and apprehension. One evening, as Emma sat scrolling on her phone on the sofa, I took a deep breath, pouring all my courage into every word, as if preparing for a battle I knew I would lose, a confrontation with no escape. "Are you still talking to T?" I asked, my voice hoarse, my heart pounding as if it would burst from my chest. The entire room fell silent. Only the steady hum of the ceiling fan and the frantic beating of my heart echoed in the empty space. Emma looked up, her eyes showing no surprise or confusion. She didn't deny it, but she didn't cry either. There were no tears of remorse, no apologies, no questions about how I knew, why I suspected. Just a terrifying calm. "We're just talking. I'm not cheating on you," she said, looking straight at me, without a flicker of emotion, as if stating the obvious, an undeniable truth. I believed Emma. I believed she wasn't cheating on me in the way people typically think of physical betrayal. I knew she wasn't sleeping with T, not kissing or holding his hand, no secret dates behind my back. But what pained me even more was that she no longer talked to me like before. Our intimate conversations, deep sharings, daily banter, the cheerful laughter when I told a funny story, all had been replaced by those invisible text messages. I wasn't jealous of T because he was Emma's ex. I was jealous because he was receiving what I once had, what I cherished: connection, understanding, and genuine sharing from my wife. I was jealous of the place he occupied in Emma's mind, a place I, her husband, could no longer reach. It felt like a door had closed, and I was left outside, in a world where I no longer belonged. I couldn't accept this disappearance. I tried desperately to win Emma back from an invisible opponent, a man who only existed through a phone screen, but who held more power than any other third party. I wanted to pull Emma back, pull her out of the virtual world she was slowly sinking into, where I had no place, where I was no longer welcome. I tried to take her out to dinner, a night just the two of us, no phones, no schedules, no distractions. I booked a table at the Italian restaurant where we had our first date, where beautiful memories still lingered in the air, where we exchanged our first declarations of love. I even prepared a new shirt, sprayed on some cologne Emma liked, shaved and trimmed my hair carefully, like a first date. She nodded, agreed, and I ignited a fragile spark of hope. How I looked forward to it, imagining a romantic evening where we could mend everything, rediscover lost connections, a spark that could rekindle the dying flame of our love. But then, at the last minute, just as I was ready to walk out the door, Emma said she had an urgent matter at work. "I'm sorry, Ryan, my boss just assigned an urgent project. I have to stay and finish it. I'm really sorry, why don't you go alone?" Her voice sounded tired, but there was no hint of regret about canceling our date. The date I had placed so much hope on, a sudden, unannounced, unpostponable work emergency, I accepted, swallowing my disappointment, telling myself she really was busy. But deep down, I knew it was just an excuse she offered too easily, too often, to the point where I almost knew it by heart. I didn't give up. A few weeks later, I organized a surprise birthday party for her, just the two of us. I spent the whole day preparing her favorite dishes, decorating the room with candles and red roses, playing the soft jazz music she liked, the song we danced to at our wedding. I even bought her a pretty little necklace she'd mentioned wanting for a long time. Emma walked in, surprised by the scene. She thanked me. Her smile seemed genuine, but her eyes quickly darted towards her phone on the living room table. Just a few minutes later, as I was trying to mix a cocktail for her, I saw her quickly check her phone again, as if something more important, more engaging, was waiting for her in that virtual world. The smile on her lips was still there, but her soul had flown elsewhere. Dinner passed in heavy silence. I tried to make conversation, talked about a comedy movie I'd just watched, about funny things at work, but her answers were curt, unelaborated, without any emotion. As if I were talking to a stranger. She ate quickly, then excused herself, saying she was tired and wanted to go to bed early. My gift, the necklace, lay untouched in its small box on the table, unworn, unappreciated. I remember another evening. I sat on the sofa. Emma sat at the other end of the room, glued to her phone. I tried to talk to her, told her about my small dreams, about wanting to fix up the backyard, about a trip I wanted to take with her. She just uh-hud or hummed, then sank back into her own world, a world I couldn't enter. I asked, "Emma, are you listening to me?" She looked up, her eyes empty. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" That's when I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It wasn't that she wasn't listening, it was that she no longer wanted to listen to me. My stories, my thoughts, seemed to have become meaningless to her. In a final attempt to reach Emma's heart, to pull her back to reality, to me, I wrote her a letter. I sat for hours in my study, under the dim desk lamp, meticulously choosing each word, crossing out, rewriting, then crossing out again. Every line, every word saturated with my feelings. The desperation of a man losing the love of his life. I recounted our most beautiful memories, about the early days when a blanket and an old movie were enough, about staying up all night talking without getting bored, about the dreams we built together, from buying this house to naming the children we never had. I wrote about my fear, the fear of losing her, of losing myself in this relationship. I placed the letter on her dressing table, where she would surely see it every morning, where she couldn't avoid it. I hoped that if she just read it, she would understand. She would feel my heart, and maybe a small spark would rekindle in her heart, a spark to salvage everything. But that letter, it was never read. I found it later, tucked between an unread magazine, still lying untouched on her dressing table, covered in a thin layer of dust, a bitter reminder of the futility of my efforts. My heart felt another stab, not anger, but utter helplessness, profound despair. I had tried. I had done everything I could, but it seemed Emma no longer wanted to look my way. She no longer cared about what I had to say, what I wanted to share. I felt like I was screaming into an endless void, with no echo, no response. I started to wonder if I had become too boring, too predictable. Had my love become a burden, an invisible chain binding her? Those questions haunted me every night, keeping me awake. I looked in the mirror and saw a tired man, with sunken eyes, a face etched with the marks of time and sorrow. I realized I was losing myself in this battle. a battle I was fighting alone. During those days, the only person I could confide in was Mark, my best friend from college. He was a quiet person, always listening and offering frank advice, sometimes seemingly harsh but always to the point. One weekend evening, I went to our usual bar, where the dim lights and soft rock music helped me feel less lonely. "You look terrible, Ryan," Mark said, setting a beer down in front of me. "Is it Emma again?" I nodded, trying to swallow. "I don't know what to do anymore. Mark, she's not here anymore. Even though she's still in the house, still beside me, her soul has gone somewhere far away." I told Mark about the text messages, about Emma's indifference, about my futile efforts. Mark listened patiently. When I finished, he sighed. "Ryan, I know you love Emma a lot, but what you're describing, it's more painful than her physically cheating. She's emotionally cheating. She's no longer choosing you to share the most important things in her life with." Mark's words hit me like a punch to the gut, but it was also a stark truth I had tried to deny for so long. "Emotional cheating," I repeated, feeling choked up. "I don't know what to do. Mark, I've tried everything." Mark looked at me with sympathetic eyes. "I know. I've seen how hard you've tried. But Ryan, a relationship needs effort from both sides. If one person no longer wants to build, then the other, no matter how hard they try, will only be trying in vain." He paused, then continued. "Do you think maybe she's also struggling with something she can't share with you? Or perhaps she's changed, and you need to accept that?" I was silent. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe Emma had her own issues, but she hadn't chosen me to face those problems. She had chosen someone else, someone on the other side of a phone screen. We tried marriage counseling. It was my idea. A last effort. A final lifeline to save everything. Emma reluctantly agreed, with an undeniable air of indifference. She said, "If you want to, then let's go, but I don't think it will help." That voice, that attitude, was like a bucket of cold water dumped on my fragile hope, extinguishing every remaining spark. In the first session, the counselor was an older woman with warm yet sharp eyes. She asked what made us choose each other. I spoke without hesitation, my voice full of emotion, almost choking up, because she made me want to be a better person. She was my inspiration, the guiding light in my life. I loved her intelligence, her gentleness, and even the way she cared about the smallest things, her every gesture, every glance. I looked at Emma, hoping for a spark in her eyes, some emotion, a sign that she still remembered those days. The reasons we had once loved each other so passionately, but Emma just looked at me, not with emotional or nostalgic eyes, but as if she was trying to remember that girl within her from back then, the version I had once loved, the version that now seemed to have vanished without a trace. She just said curtly, "We were compatible, and he was kind, nothing more, nothing less, no emotion at all," as if talking about a stranger. The second session passed heavily. The counselor tried to lead Emma to share her feelings, to bring up deeper issues in our relationship, but Emma always answered indifferently, vaguely, avoiding the core issues. "I feel fine. I have nothing to say. I don't think there's a big problem." She constantly tried to steer the conversation towards general topics, or blamed work stress. Emma's silence and evasiveness made all efforts at reconciliation hopeless. I felt like I was talking to an invisible wall, a wall I couldn't penetrate, couldn't break down. By the third session, Emma didn't show up. She texted me, a short, abrupt message. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I don't feel comfortable sharing private things with a stranger. I don't think this will help us." I knew it wasn't discomfort. It was no longer wanting to fight, a complete surrender. She had given up, and I was still desperately clinging to something shattered, a relationship that had died from within, a marital corpse. Despair began to seep into every cell of my being. I spent more time out, trying to work later at the office, or stopping by friends' bars to find some false peace in alcohol, to forget the painful reality. But every time I came home, loneliness washed over me, more intensely than ever. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. As my car pulled up in front of the house, I already felt something was off. The house was deserted. No sounds from the living room or kitchen. I stepped inside. An eerie silence enveloped the space. I heard giggling echoing from the bathroom. Emma's familiar laughter. Laughter I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. Not even a polite smile. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My heart pounded in my chest, as if it wanted to leap out. I stood frozen for a moment, listening clearly to every sound, every giggle, every whisper I couldn't quite make out. It was the sound of comfort, of joy, the laughter I used to bring, the laughter that once filled this house. Now, it belonged to someone else. The bathroom door was ajar, a small crack just enough for me to see. I peered through. Through the crack, I saw the blurred image of T on Emma's phone screen. They were video calling. Emma was smiling radiantly, telling some story I couldn't hear clearly, but her eyes sparkled with joy, her face radiant with happiness. She brushed her hair back, her smile charming, and I realized it had been so long since Emma had smiled at me like that. There was nothing overly intimate, no hugs or kisses, no physical actions crossing any boundaries, but the light in her eyes, that sparkling, vibrant light, the light of connection and sharing, the light that once belonged to me, now belonged to someone else, even if only through a video call, a lifeless phone screen. I felt the connection between them, a deep connection I no longer had with Emma. In that moment, I knew I had lost, not to a flesh and blood rival, a third party who had intruded into my marriage, but to a shadow, an invisible relationship that had infiltrated every corner of Emma's soul, consuming her attention and her willingness to share. I felt so small, so useless. Oh, I stood there, silently watching, no tears falling, but my heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. I understood then that Emma hadn't betrayed me physically, but she had betrayed me emotionally, a betrayal even more painful. She no longer chose me as the person to share her deepest thoughts, her joys and sorrows, her dreams, her plans. She had chosen someone else. A week after that fateful evening, as I was still trying to digest the pain and accept the brutal truth, when every night I would wake up startled by those invisible text messages, by the sound of Emma's phone vibrating in the next bedroom, Emma suggested we try to take some time apart. Her voice was calm, devoid of emotion, as if she were talking about the weather or some work plan unrelated to my life. I think we need some space to rethink things. Ryan, I feel suffocated. Suffocated. Suffocated with me, or suffocated with this marriage, or suffocated with her own choices. No deeper explanation, no tears, no remorse was evident on her face. I didn't argue. I knew arguing now would be useless. I was depleted of energy, depleted of hope, depleted of even tears. I moved into my parents' old apartment, about 20 minutes drive from our house, a familiar place, once a childhood home, where I had beautiful memories, but now it felt strangely alien and frighteningly empty. I only brought a few changes of clothes and essentials, some old books, and a small photo frame with Emma's radiant smile from our early days of love. No goodbye to Emma, no hug, no handhold. Just like that, I walked out of my marriage into a new, solitary world. Every night was deafeningly silent. No texts, no calls, no sign that anyone was thinking of me, missing me. I tried to get used to living alone, with lonely meals, long empty nights, with the frightening stillness of the apartment. I tried calling Emma a few times just to check in, to see how she was doing, to find some lingering connection, but she always replied that she was busy, or answered texts curtly, coldly, just a few clipped words. I'm busy. I'm fine. Nothing to say. I was no longer the most important person in her life. I realized that we were no longer a couple, but just two individuals drifting in our own separate universes, no longer intersecting, no longer connected. I had thought perhaps Emma would feel empty. Perhaps she would miss me, miss our memories, our routines. But no. Her life seemed to continue normally, perhaps even better without me. My absence left no void in her life, and that was the most painful thing. During our time apart, I saw Mark frequently. He was the only one I could truly open up to. One evening, as I was telling Mark about my empty days, about how Emma seemed to have completely forgotten my existence, Mark said, "Ryan, don't you think sometimes silence is more terrifying than words?" She didn't talk, didn't argue, didn't explain. That means she's already given up. But why I asked, my voice full of anguish. Why not another man? Someone who could have made her truly cheat so I could have a reason to be angry, to hate. Mark looked at me, his eyes full of understanding. Ryan, maybe it's precisely because there's nothing obvious that it hurts so much. She didn't betray you physically because she didn't need to. She got the emotional connection she was looking for from someone else, and that, in a way, is even more destructive to your relationship than a simple affair. Mark was right. A physical betrayal could be mended. There could be apologies, forgiveness, but emotional betrayal, The loss of a soul connection is almost impossible to salvage. I spent many nights tossing and turning, thinking about Mark's words, Emma's silence, her indifference, the messages with T. It all coalesced into a clear picture. Emma no longer chose me. She had chosen a different path for her heart and soul, a path without me. One afternoon, after a day at the office, trying to focus on numbers and reports to forget everything, tired after a long day, I returned to my parents' old apartment. As I stepped into my study, where I usually kept important papers, there was a neat stack of documents on the desk, as if it had been waiting for me for a long time. A cruel twist of fate. My heart sank. I knew what it was, even before I touched it. No letter, no explanation, not a single line to soften the pain. No gentle words, no "I'm sorry" or "we're not compatible anymore." Just the divorce papers, clearly printed, with Emma's part already signed. Her signature still sharp and decisive, just like her personality. I wasn't surprised. I had known this was coming, felt it for a very long time, ever since the night I read that first message. But my heart still clenched, aching, as if a part of me, the most important part of my life, a piece of my soul that I had entrusted to Emma, had just been ripped out. It felt like an old wound had been torn open, fresh and chilling, bleeding incessantly. I looked at the paper, at Emma's signature. It was the familiar signature, the one that had signed our marriage certificate, our wedding invitations, our anniversary photos. Now, it was signing an ending, an irreversible conclusion, a complete surrender. I picked up the pen. No hesitation, no message left for Emma, no words explaining my feelings, because what more was there to say? Everything was already too clear. I signed, my signature, next to Emma's, like an epilogue to a story that had withered away long ago, not by fire, but by the coldness of indifference and lost connection. I folded the papers and put them in the envelope. Holding it in my hand, it felt incredibly heavy, like I was holding the entire weight of 8 years of marriage, 8 years of love, hope, and now, loss. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof of my failure, of a shattered dream, of a life I had envisioned, a future I had painstakingly built. I looked out the window. Atlanta was still sparkling with lights, still buzzing and bustling. Life went on, but my life had just taken a different turn, a solitary path, full of unanswered questions. I didn't hate Emma, I just felt sorry for myself, for the years of my youth, the effort, and all the trust I had invested in this relationship, a trust that had been crushed. I understood that love isn't just about physical fidelity, it's also about the fidelity of the soul, of sharing and presence. When one of those is lost, even without a third party interfering in the way we usually think, the marriage becomes nothing more than an empty name, a graveyard of dead dreams. Our marriage didn't end with a bang, a shocking scandal, but with a quiet sigh, a painful acceptance, a silent letting go. Divorce doesn't always come from physical betrayal, from dramatic confrontations or bitter tears, the noisy tragedies you often see in the news. Sometimes, it comes from the lack of courage to face and fix things, on the part of one person, or both. It comes from the loss of connection, of sharing, and from one person slowly disappearing from the other's life without even realizing it, until all that's left is an empty shell of a relationship, an empty presence beside each other, but souls that have drifted far away. And sometimes, a text message not meant for you is the beginning of an end you were never ready to read to the last page. The name T wasn't a destroyer in the literal sense. He was just a catalyst, an excuse for Emma to find a place to share, a place I could no longer be. What I lost wasn't a wife in the true sense of a spouse, but a life partner, a soulmate, a part of my spirit that had been intertwined with mine. Now, all that remains is loneliness, an unfillable void in my heart. Marriage isn't just a piece of paper, a promise made at the altar. It's a shared journey, a daily choice to be present, to listen, and to share. When one person stops choosing the other, that's when their story ends. Even if no goodbyes are spoken, no tears are shed, it's a silent disappearance, but one that hurts to the bone, a harsh lesson about what truly matters in a relationship. Thank you for listening to my story, the story of a marriage's quiet breakdown. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Share it to spread the message about the value of connection in love and marriage. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next authentic and meaningful everyday stories. Every share, Every like from you is a huge motivation for me to continue telling stories from the heart, hoping to touch the hearts of many others.